It was September 2018 when Robbie Shone, a National Geographic cave photographer, joined the Russian caving team Perovo-Speleo to explore and photograph Veryovkina, a cave known as the deepest on Earth. In the same month, Shone would fight for his life as he and his team desperately climbed steep, jagged rocks against the oncoming rush of floodwater, which suddenly poured into the cave with the strength of a freight train. The Veryovkina cave is located in the Veryovkina Massif in Abkhazia, a region in Georgia. It was discovered in 1968 by cavers from Krasnoyarsk, but they only reached a depth of 115 meters. Over the next 3 decades, other teams would venture into the cave, going deeper and deeper each time, but still only reaching a depth of 440 meters. It wasn't until August 2015 when cavers from a Speleo club, Perovo, discovered a new shaft that would lead to a series of future discoveries. September 2018, a Russian team led by Pavel Demidov went down the Veryovkina cave for a photo expedition. They were joined by British cave photographers Robbie Shone and his photo assistant Jeff Wade. Pavel Demidov, together with the rest of his team, Petr Lubimov, Andrei Zhizhnikov, Roman Zverev, Natalia Zhizhikova, along with 4 others, are all members of Perovo-Speleo caving team, an official group of world-class cavers from Moscow. Back in March 2018, Demidov and his team reached a terminal sump at the water table while on an expedition in the Veryovkina cave. The sump was at a low point of 2,212 meters, which set the record for Veryovkina, making it the deepest known cave on Earth. After achieving this record, the team returned in September to explore the promising horizontal leads at the bottom of Veryovkina, as well as collect samples of rare, possibly new species of shrimp and scorpion. Robbie Shone joined this expedition in order to create a series of still images documenting the entire cave, including its extraordinary terminus, which as Shone described was a beautiful turquoise lake, about 15 meters long and 8 meters wide, surrounded by jet black limestone. The Veryovkina's terminal siphon was a beautiful but at the same time eerie location. This expedition would last for several days, and for the most part, it was uneventful, until the 7th day, when an enormous torrent of white water came flooding in, catching the team at the bottom of the cave off guard. It took the team 4 days to reach Veryovkina's low point. To do so, they climbed down thousands of feet of rope, crawled through water and mud-filled siphons, and squeezed themselves and their heavy packs of gear through the most torturous, improbable cracks. At 2,200 meters, the team reached the cave's lowest camp, a flat, sandy spot in a horizontal tunnel. There they spent 3 days exploring new corridors, collecting invertebrate specimens, and taking photographs. 2 of the members left early on the 3rd day to catch a flight home. They were Roman Zverev and Natalia Zhizhikova. On their way out, upon reaching a camp halfway in the cave at 1,300 meters deep, the 2 saw a flood pulse. Flood pulses are common occurrences in caves. Heavy rains can cause water to collect, then because of the volume, suddenly burst through the cave openings, resulting in flood pulses that can last a few minutes to a few hours before eventually subsiding. Cavers would often deal with flood pulses, and as a precaution, would install cable wires for easier communication. The Russians have installed their own cable wires, which Zverev and Zhizhikova used to issue a warning to their friends below. Initially, Shone wasn't worried about the flood pulse. Their camp was safely adjacent to the main vertical shaft and was well protected. The team figured they were in the safest spot possible. They figured wrong. Half an hour after receiving the warning, Shone had just started breakfast when suddenly they heard the deafening roar of floodwaters. It got louder and louder, Shone says later while telling of the harrowing ordeal. I will never forget that sound. The rumble grew, and the entire cave began to shake. It was as if a freight train was hurtling through the tunnel. Shone, still holding his breakfast bowl, rushed out of their group tent with his teammates. They turned their headlamps toward the noise and saw an unforgettable scene. The most enormous torrent of white water appeared out of this hole, Shone says, and I just stood open-mouthed at the sight of this huge white wall of water entering our little home. In the beginning of the flood pulse, despite its scary thunder, the team was still relaxed. their camp was staying dry as it was adjacent to the main vertical shaft that was currently spewing an unfathomable volume of water. But one of the cavers, Petr Lubimov, noticed a gurgling sound from a small hole in the ground adjacent to their tent. There wasn't any water. However, the flood pulse had already been raging for over 2 hours with no sign of abating, so this small, inconspicuous noise presented enough of a concern that he told team leader Pavel Demidov about it. Demidov agreed with Lubimov's concern, and accompanied by some of their teammates, he went back to check a nearby siphon, hoping to gauge how high the water table had actually risen. No more than 5 minutes after they left, Lubimov went back to the small hole, and this time, he saw water rising up so fast it was jostling off the walls. Face white, he turned and looked at Shone. And then, all hell broke loose. Shone rushed to don his latex suit, which goes over the fleece base layer that he had been wearing while on camp. To remain waterproof, the latex suit must be twisted shut at the neck, wrist, and ankle cuffs. Jeff Wade, Shone's assistant, helped him seal his suit, then Shone helped Wade with his. They then slipped into their abrasion-resistant nylon shells and donned their harnesses, helmets, and rope ascending gear. Shone made a calculated decision at this time to leave all of his camera and personal gear behind. They cost tens of thousands of dollars, but they were heavy. With over a mile of vertical ropes to climb above him, taking the equipment might slow him down and risk not only his life, but also those of his teammates who would be climbing behind him. He did, however, take his camera's flashcards, as they contain the only photographs ever captured of Veryovkina's terminus. He placed them in a Ziploc bag that he slipped inside his latex suit. Wade called out to Lubimov and the Russian told them to go. Lubimov will wait for Demidov and the others before following. That was the last interaction the Brits would have with the Russians at the low camp. Shone headed toward the ropes that led up and out. To get there, he had to traverse a previously airy shaft that was now completely filled with water. At the end of the traverse, he reached the vertical ropes, and above that, a raging waterfall was pouring over them. Shone clipped his ascenders into the rope and started climbing. The tremendous weight of the water had a crushing, suffocating force as it pummeled Shone. It was hard to breathe. The only way to get air was to tuck his chin and create a small pocket of space beneath his helmet brim. "All I could see was the white rope in front of me," says Shone, "and I just kept moving the ascender up a little bit at a time. I was saying to myself, just keep going, just keep doing this." Shone reached a point where he could step to the side of the torrent. He looked up to see where the rope was running. It led into a body-sized chimney of rock through which the flood furiously pumped. "I just thought you're joking. I physically can't get through that," says Shone. "Where am I going to go? There's no airspace, there's nothing." But Shone knew he hadn't climbed high enough yet to be safe. He had to keep going. He forced his way up through the narrow shaft, pushing his ascender up a few inches at a time. The driving force of the water was punishing. He took sips of air as he struggled to crawl up through the barrage, but he made it. He hoped Wade, who was following behind him, could do the same. Having passed through the narrow space, Shone found himself ascending in a relatively dry section where the flood had taken a different path. Below, Wade yelled for him to slow down. Eventually, the two were able to climb to a camp at 1,900 meters where there was a tent stocked with some food and medical supplies. As they waited for the rest of their teammates, the rumbling flood continued to shake the floor beneath them. Soon, they saw a single headlamp appear coming up the ropes. It was Andrei Zhizhnikov. Wade asked him if he'd seen the others. Zhizhnikov shook his head. They waited in silence. 15 minutes later, more headlamps appeared. One by one, each of the 5 remaining Russians came up the rope. They had escaped in the nick of time. By the time Pavel Demidov had returned from scoping the siphon, the traverse that was just above water when Shone escaped was completely submerged. They had to swim to access the vertical ropes going through the waterfall. In the process, Demidov got caught in an eddy that sent him spinning, as if he were being flushed down a giant toilet bowl. He fought the current and swam hard to reach the line. "I could not believe it," Shone says. "These guys are so strong and so capable. Kostya had even carried up a pack with sleeping bags, a stove, and a brew kit, whereas I had almost selfishly only thought about my photos. Kostya had brought 4 sleeping bags." The team, now reunited, spent the next 16 hours at the camp. The flood pulse lasted 20 straight hours and cut their trip short by a day. Still, the expedition was successful. New passages were mapped and explored. Several cave invertebrates were taken for analysis, and a number of climbs were completed to check potential high-level passages. Shone lost all of his equipment, but all of them were able to get out of the cave alive. This was not the only disaster to ever happen in Veryovkina cave. On August 3, 2021, 3 years after the flood pulse disaster, the body of a climber was discovered 1,100 meters deep into the cave. He was identified as Sergei Koziv, who went missing in November of the previous year. Evgeny Snetkov, a member of the board of the Union of Cavers, believed Koziv was a tourist who had not adequately prepared for the challenges of the cave. Based on the investigation, the man did not have the proper gear and clothing appropriate for the extreme environment within Veryovkina. He also appeared to have gone into the cave alone. Snetkov stressed that descending into such a dangerous cave without a trained team is a gross violation of safety regulations. It hasn't been determined whether Koziv deceased after falling or from hypothermia, though his body was eventually recovered on August 17, 2021, after a group of about 100 cavers joined together to perform a complex retrieval operation. If you have followed the story to this point, I would like to say a big thank you. If you like this kind of story, don't forget to hit the like button and comment below. If you're interested in this type of content, please click on the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you will be notified when another video is posted. Until next time, be cautious and don't ever lose your sense of wonder.